Chapter 6. The studio, into which Hubbard and I immediately followed him, was a large oblong apartment, with a portion of one of its longer sides and almost the whole of the roof glazed. More or less light could be admitted by means of a system of dark blue blinds and cords running to cleats on the walls. It was to the roof glass that my eyes turned first of all. One corner of it was darkened, as if melted snow had slipped down its slope, but the irregular triangle thus made was not so dark but that the shapes of the two heads could be seen, a little darker still. Nearer up to the ridge one thick pane was badly starred, and in the middle of the star was a small hole. This I judged to have been made by the broken branch that still brushed and played about it. A couple of pictures had fallen from the walls and lay face downward among their sprinklings of broken glass on the floor. One or two others were disarranged. Otherwise the apartment seemed to be undamaged. Esdale's behavior was now odder than ever. With those two men lying on the roof just over his head and the police moving about the garden outside, apparently he found nothing more urgent to do than to move displaced rugs about and to push at the bits of broken glass with his foot. And he did this with the candle, now a stalagmite of tallow, still licking and flickering in his hand. He made no remark when Hubbard took the candle almost roughly from him, blew it out and set it down on the table where the artist's tubes and brushes usually stood. "We'll be rid of that first of all," he said. "Unless it's a mascot. Scaring 'em to death with that in your hand like a sleepwalker in traveling tweeds. Now what about it, Esdale?" There was sudden attention in Philip's attitude, though he still looked down at the floor and pushed at a rug with his toe. "What about what?" he asked. "About this last half hour." "You mean where have I been?" "I went down into the cellar. I went to get that liqueur. That doesn't take half an hour, and it certainly didn't take this particular half hour." To this Esdale made no reply. "Come," said Hubbard again after a pause. "You admitted just now that you thought you heard something." The words came slowly. "Did I?" "Yes, I remember. But it was all muffled. Honestly, I couldn't tell from the sound that it was all this. Was that when you were down there, or as you were going down, or when?" "I just got down, I think." "But didn't you wonder what was the matter? What kept you all that time? And what's the matter with you now that you have come up?" "The matter?" Esdale began once more to parry, and then suddenly his manner changed. For the first time he looked up from the floor, and the mask, whatever it was, almost dropped. "Look here, you fellows," he said almost appealingly, "you might see I'm a bit worried. I've been trying to hide it, but perhaps it wasn't much of an effort. Not so dashed easy to hide. But if you're suggesting that I've been somewhere else besides in the cellar, I can only tell you I haven't. Couldn't for one thing. Rook's got every key of this house. I had to get the cellar one from him. By the way, what's he doing now?" "Looking out your next train. But what I want to know is..." He broke off suddenly as sounds were heard over our heads. About the snow slip on the roof other shadowy shapes could be seen. Feet shuffled and moved, and the broken branch was dragged away. They were preparing to get the two men down. And until they should have finished, our conversation ceased. But in the meantime Esdale did yet another trivial incongruous thing. Moving towards one set of blind cords he motioned to me to take another set. With short sticking tugs we drew the blinds across a foot at a time, and soon only narrow gold lozenges of sunlight showed among the rafters. All below was a dark blue twilight, as if for an obsequy within instead of for one on the roof. Then, when from the cessation of sound all appeared to be over, Hubbard made a fresh appeal. He took the painter's arm. "Now let's have this out," he said. "No good letting a thing get way on when a few plain words will stop it. A perfectly ordinary thing's happened. Simple parachute accident. No mystery about it whatever. The mystery only begins when you come in carrying your damned candles and dropping jars and coming in here to tidy up instead of going outside to see what's happened. That's where the answer begins to be a lemon, my son. Listen to me. Whether you heard that crash or whether you didn't, at any rate you know all about it now. Then why can't you be just decently upset like the rest of us and have done with it?" "Decently upset?" The words seemed to strike him. "Have I been behaving any other way?" "You were behaving damnably indecently when you came up out of the orlop there, and that was before you were told a word of all this, remember." At last Esdale saw the point. His behavior had been extraordinary for whole minutes before the situation had been explained to him. One would have thought that during those minutes he had been deliberately trying to find out how much we knew about something or other before committing himself. When next he spoke it was almost apologetically. "I see," he said quietly at last. "Yes, you're perfectly right. That was certainly the proper way to take it, just be decently upset. I see now. I must have looked a perfect zany. Now look here. I want to tell you both all about it, But the trouble is that I can't just at this moment. At present it's somebody else's affair, not mine at all. Must get that cleared up first. I'm not perfectly sure of my ground either, you'll see by and by. But as regards the accident, well, that's the whole point at present. Mean anybody would say it was an accident, wouldn't they? It looked like one, I mean. It would never occur to anybody who saw it that. But here he broke off abruptly as his wife appeared in the doorway.